welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm Madeline.
And I'm Andrea.
And this is episode 155. Fruity Knitting is your gateway to knitting inspiration from around the world, with extra snippets of travel, history and storytelling that we hope adds joy to your life and brings a smile to your face.
And we've just come back from an intensive 2-week trip to the UK where we recorded some really great interviews that we're very excited to share with you over the coming months. And one of those interviews is our feature today, and that's with Georgia Farrell, who you might remember from episode 123. So Georgia is a regular designer for Rowan yarns, and she's recently released a new collection called Abstract Volume 2. So Georgia's designs have a very fresh modern feel, and she plays with bold colour contrasts and geometric shapes and rich textures to reflect the look and feel of contemporary architecture, which is her current passion. And Georgia is also teaching the workshops for one of our knitting retreats in the Austrian Alps later this year. That goes from the 12th to the 17th of October. And at the moment, we have 3 spots left in this retreat. And I think this interview is going to give a really good preview of the kinds of techniques and inspirations that Georgia will share with us during her workshop. So I want to very quickly say something about that now. So Georgia will be showing us how to combine intarsia with textured stitches, and we'll also have a class on choosing colour combinations that really work. So in that class we'll learn about proportion and balance within a colour palette. And for that we'll have lots of coloured yarns to play with and explore. In fact, Rowan has actually donated some yarns for us, especially for that class, which is brilliant. In another class, we'll go through all the basics of how to knit intarsia, from preparing your yarns to weaving in the ends very neatly. And in our final class, we'll get very creative with collages, turning them into repeating patterns and then into knitting charts. So in a sense, it's going to be like a mini design class. I think it's a great program. And I want to say that you don't have to be an advanced knitter to enjoy these workshops, as long as you can knit and purl and increase and decrease and have knitted some items already. So basically just feel very confident with 2 sticks and string. I think you're really going to enjoy the workshops. And both Madeline and I are going to be present during the workshops as George's assistant to answer any extra questions or to help anybody who might be learning at a slightly slower pace, because when you're in a group, everyone does learn at different paces. And you're going to see this in the interview. Georgia is an extremely sweet, lovely person, so I think we're all going to have a lot of fun together. We're very excited. Outside of the workshops, we actually have some super fantastic fun activities planned to enjoy together. And so we're just super excited about the full program that we've put together, and it's coming up soon.
Yeah.
And we've also got some non-knitting partners joining us already. So I think there's husbands, daughters, and best friends even. So if after watching the interview you feel inspired and want to dive deeper into Georgia's world or also spend some time with us, you can go to artisanretreats.com and fill out a registration form. And you're most welcome to bring your favourite non-knitting person with you to share the experience.
Yeah. All right, so we also have a mini interview with Astrid from Bodolina, which we recorded back in April at the Swiss Yarn Festival. So Astrid makes high-quality knitting needle cases from felted wool, and their unique design allows you to access your needles really quickly. And they come in different styles and sizes, so some are made specifically for storing DP ends, while others are made for circular knitting needles, and we're going to show you some examples later on. And during the interview, Astrid basically shows us her full range of knitting needle cases, and you'll notice she's very farbenfroh, which is a lovely German word for somebody who adores colour. Personally, I've become a real fan since seeing those cases, and I think after watching the interview, you will too.
And also, of course, included in the program is updates on our own knitting projects. And as many of you know, Madeline's getting married in just 5 weeks now, and I have been knitting her a wedding veil. So we're going to start with that in under construction. But first, this wedding veil is very much connected to how she's going to wear her hair, and the hairpiece that is going in the hair with the wedding veil. So I think we should start with you talking about that.
Yeah, so Mum and I have been planning my wedding outfit. And this has been very exciting for me, of course, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And for me, because I've only got one daughter.
Yeah. And so I've noticed that I'm very much into old-fashioned things. For example, my engagement ring used to belong to Ryan's grandmother, and it has these beautiful little roses in different stages of blossoming on the side of it. I love it, and it definitely looks more antique and unique than what you'll find in most jewellery stores these days. And my wedding dress has a very simple and elegant cut that simultaneously reminds me of a 1930s ball gown and of an elf costume from Lord of the Rings. And the fabric is drapey and slightly shiny in a colour that is not white. Now, one of the highlights of this dress is definitely that it has a low cut back. So to accentuate this, I'm going to wear my hair in a low bun. And of course, the biggest highlight is the stunning lace wedding veil that Mum has been knitting for me. The pattern is called the 12th of Never, and it was designed by Monique from A Passion for Lace. Mum interviewed Monique back in episode 28, so if you haven't watched it in a while, I recommend revisiting it. And Mum knitted this in extremely fine cobweb weight yarn, and she had to make a few changes to the original construction to give the shawl a more veil-like shape.
This has been probably the most challenging lace project I've ever knitted, not necessarily because of the pattern, but because I'm knitting it in cobweb weight yarn. So I'm going to show it to you in just a second and talk about it in more detail. But first of all, just talk more about how it fits in with the outfit.
Yeah. So here's a little sketch to help you understand what I'm visualizing, and just note that this isn't what my dress actually looks like. Like I said, to show off the low back of my dress, I will probably wear my hair in a low bun. And I've ordered this beautiful hair vine from Etsy to wrap around the back of my head, just above the bun. It has a very soft and ethereal look, and definitely gives off some Lord of the Ring vibes. I plan to place the veil just below the vine, above the hair bun, but I don't want the veil attached to the vine because I'm going to remove the veil for the after party to avoid any stains or snags, and therefore we will likely use transparent hair combs or something else that holds the veil in place, but can easily be removed without damaging the veil or the hairstyle. Mum also suggested adding a braid above the hair vine that also wraps around the back of my head. And I think this is a nice idea because it would add some more texture and just look very pretty.
So here's the beautiful hair vine. It's very sweet. It's got lots of little pearls, little crystals and little cream flowers, and it's attached to ribbon, but you can easily unattach it. It's just there in case you want to use it. You can wear it in all different ways. So you could wear it like around the front like this,
which looks a bit medieval,
or around the back, which like that without the ribbon, like was in the schematic, or just like a typical hairband like that. So it's very versatile.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And totally gorgeous and a little bit old-fashioned.
Perfect. So the veil itself at the top is probably measuring now 40 to 50 centimetres, which means I'm going to have it roughly from here around the back of my head to here. And I would really love for the heart-covered borders to frame my face before the veil sweeps back. As you can see, I feel like I'm just playing dress up at this point.
And we've got an appointment tomorrow with the
hairstylist. Yeah, so we're going to try out the different ideas and then finalise the hairstyle. And also, you're going to notice when I show some photos from my wedding that it's extremely long. It's a very long veil.
Well, it's not that long because some veils trail.
That's true. That's
so
true. It doesn't
it's 95, but it goes from about here down to your below the bum.
Yeah.
So
but that's going to look
thigh
good.
level. Yeah. Okay, so now for the great reveal. Here it is.
I had to take my ring off so I don't snag it.
You've got to be so careful. It's so delicate. So why don't you hold this bit here, and we'll try to get as much of it on camera as possible. And I think it's good that I'm wearing a simple plain dress because you can see it a little bit better.
Yeah.
If you hold yours up. Yeah. So along the base, you see these lovely sort of diamond shape with little pointy edges. And I think the most special thing is the hearts along the outside. They're just very delicate, very beautiful 2 rows of hearts here.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can see that. And I've left my lifelines in. If you see a little blue line here and a red line there, that's just, and some stitch markers hanging off, that's not decoration. They're lifelines in case something happens, it snags and I have to suddenly repair it. I'm very nervous about ever pulling them out, but I'll have to pull them out for the wedding.
Yeah.
Okay, but it is incredible. I've blocked it especially for your viewing because you can't appreciate how delicate and ethereal it looks unless it's been blocked. Otherwise, it's just kind of crumpled up. But when it's blocked, as you can see the stitch pattern opens up completely. You see the beautiful hearts. You see this and the lovely mesh underneath it and the border here. It's all very beautiful. So it's knitted in 100% cashmere in cobweb weight yarn. And the cobweb weight is what is so tricky because cobweb is like sewing thread. It's as thin as sewing thread. It's as thin as this sewing thread, which I used as my lifeline. Unfortunately, though, sewing thread you can't break it, but because it's 100% cashmere, this thread you could easily break. So it's the kind of project that you don't watch television with. You have to have your eyes on the needle because if I drop a stitch, it easily just goes shh, and it ladders right down. So it's been a full-on visual concentration thing. The pattern itself was, after a while, very easy to memorize, so that was no problem. But having mistakes or doing any mistakes, it was incredibly difficult to unpick because if you could imagine knitting in sewing thread, that the row of stitches underneath the row that's on your needles are like tiny little knots. So if you're backpack picking, it's really hard to open them up and get them properly on your needle. So here it is. I'm trying to give you the best view of it.
But Mum's done a very good job.
Yeah, and hopefully you can see the lovely border as well. Let me put a bit more border against my yellow dress. So there we go. So you might remember from the last episode that I wanted to change the shape of the original shawl just to make it longer without making it wider. So with Monique's advice, Monique is the designer, I decided to knit an extra 20 to 30 centimetres straight before starting the decreases that go between the hearts and the mesh section on either side of the veil. So that all went well and I began the decreases, and then we realised that the veil still wouldn't be long enough. So I ripped it back to the start of the decreases, and instead of decreasing every second row, I changed to decreasing roughly every sixth row. So that all sounds very simple, just to rip it out to the lifeline, pick up the stitches and re-knit with new decrease ratios. But it wasn't like that at all. For me, I was very nervous about ripping it out. And I did say to Madeline that if I did, it's her choice, but if I did rip it out, there's a 50% chance that I would completely botch it up and she would have either no veil or a botched up veil. And she has to be responsible. And she said...
Oh, I just said, go right ahead.
Go right ahead. She obviously had more faith in me or it than I did. So I did it, but thank goodness it did work. Like I said, the biggest problem, I wasn't confident that if I ripped down to a lifeline, I'd be able to get all of the stitches on my needle again, because it's incredible how tiny they are. They can sort of slip out and they're tiny little knots. And I thought, oh, who knows what'll happen. And if I'm trying to put it on my needle and it slips down further, then all is lost.
But you did a good job.
There we go. It's finished.
Yeah.
I'm very glad. Now we have to keep it looking like this until it's been worn.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's a very special present. Now we're still under construction with, you guessed it, the Varde Rundfeld sweater by Rauma Designs, which I've been knitting for my wonderful fiance Ryan. And to be honest, at the moment, I'm feeling a bit disappointed and frustrated with this project because I was so excited to have this jumper done soon. I did a lot of knitting while we were driving through the UK, and by the time we got back, I'd completed the body and started on the sleeve. However, when Ryan tried on the jumper, it looked too small on him, which was super disappointing. He said it felt very comfortable and there was a little bit of positive ease, But when I compared to how this jumper looked to how his store-bought jumpers looked, which sit a bit more loosely on his body, the store-bought jumpers undeniably looked better. So that was frustrating, and I made the hard decision to rip everything back, which has been taking a while. So as you can see, I still have a fair bit to go. And I will either rip back to right underneath the armholes or to here where the first decreases start. And I probably won't add any extra decreases at all to the body. And I'm considering going up to here and changing to a larger needle size, even so it's a bit looser. We'll see. But I'm giving this jumper a break for a month or two because I'm a bit sick of it right now. And Mum's prediction of it turning or going from boyfriend sweater to fiance sweater to husband sweater is unintentionally becoming true.
Maybe that's the key for it to stop the boyfriend sweater curse.
Ryan's just sticking around until he gets this darn jumper.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, we have been enjoying some really nice warm weather in Frankfurt lately, and so naturally I'm feeling a very strong urge to knit myself some more summer tops. And I have some Knitting for Olive merino yarn left over from when I knitted the Jenny jacket by Petite Knit for my best friend Antonia. Now this colourway is called Dusty Rose, and when I read the Danish translation I was a bit surprised because I didn't realise it was Danish at the time. It's called Gammelrosa, and German speakers know that Gammel can be associated with mouldy. So I wondered, why would you call your colour mouldy rose? But I googled it, and Gammel means old, so old rose in Danish.
Which is kind of old-fashioned like you.
Yes, that's true. Despite its confusing name, I do think it's a very beautiful colour.
Yeah.
And I have decided to knit the olive top by Knitting for Olive. This is the olive top. It's covered in a pretty but simple stitch pattern that resembles leaves. It has a deep V neckline on the front and the back, and it's worked from the top down. So the top half is knitted flat as 4 separate triangles until you join those triangles to knit the body in the round. And finally you go back to the top of those triangles, which have live stitches, and the shoulder straps are picked up from those live stitches and then grafted together at the top of the shoulder. And I'm sure other designs also use this technique, but it was new for me, and I think it's really brilliant because it means that if your row gauge turned out a little bit different and maybe your top's too long or too short, you can perfectly adjust the strap length right at the end for an ideal fit. So I think that's really neat. Now when you go to Ravelry to see how other people's projects turned out, most of them look really nice, and to me that indicates that the pattern's probably well written, which is a bonus. Now, most people did use the recommended Knitting for Olive Pure Silk or their Cotton Merino blend, and both of those yarns have more drape and are probably a bit more suited for summer than my 100% merino. I've knitted a swatch here because 100% merino is a bit more bouncy. Now, the swatch isn't blocked yet, to be fair, which is why it looks a bit scraggly. And I showed you the wrong side. So, however, this 100% merino is also recommended for the pattern. So I'm hoping that even if it's more bouncy, it's going to turn out just as nice when I've knitted it into a top. Anyway, now we're going to go to the Swiss Yarn Festival to meet Astrid from Bodolina. So enjoy the next segment and we will see you on the other side. I'm with Astrid from Bodolina, and she is one of the vendors here at the Swiss Yarn Festival. Bodolina is a small German business in Bavaria that specializes in knitting needle cases. And I know there are many needle cases on the market, but Astrid's designs are one of a kind. And so we've come here to find out why. So Astrid, tell us how your business Bodolina got started.
Oh, my husband was very sick and had need a long time care. Mm-hmm. And I'm start knitting a lot again. And he see me searching for needles in my, the package, yes. And he told me, please make anything to stop this.
To clean up the mess around the house.
And so I go upside and create a needle bag.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you
Okay.
got it patented or protected?
No, yes, I sew needle bags here. It's one of the first.
Yeah.
Yes, for jeans. And I give it to my girlfriends, knitting friends. And she says, wow, super, you have to go to a lawyer. And I go there, and he told me I can protect the design, but I cannot have a patent. Yes. And so I start to sew with my household sewing machine the bags.
Yeah, and started selling them.
I sell it in a local yarn shop, and it's become bigger and bigger, and I create a online shop. I start to go to wool markets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And where does the name Bodolina come from?
I never think about to make a big business with needle bags. I take my revelry name. It was Bodolina, like my old dog, Bodo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he left me after 16 wonderful years, and now he lives.
Yeah, he lives on in your business. That's nice. So you've got so many different designs in front of us now. Why don't you take us through each needle case and explain what they're particularly good for?
Okay. The most bite needle cases is a circular needle bag because I have a quick access to my needles.
Yeah.
I can close, I can open, I have a quick access. I can store here, here, here. I have 42 needles inside.
Wow.
42. And
That's a lot. What else do we have here?
this one is for interchangeable needles. And you can store a lot of needles because in each compartment you can store 2, 5, 6 sets. And between the cable and in the bag you have something you can store your accessment.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is a small daughter of the great interchangeable needle bag.
Yeah.
It's for the small tips. It's a little bit difficult to make your fingers inside, but it's nice. Okay.
Nice and warm.
Yes. Then we have needle bags for DPNs. This one is only for 15 centimeter DPNs. You can store also crochet hooks.
Yeah.
Luckily.
That looks excellent. I could use one of these.
Yes. And this one is the same, but you can store 15 centimeter DPNs and 20 centimeter DPNs.
So let's just show that to the camera.
Yes.
It sort of goes up in stages.
Yes.
That looks really nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have the teeny tiny needle bag for small circular needles or the trio needles, you know. I have the needle bag to go. It's a small bag. It's smaller than the other one.
So it's not as deep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Needle bag to go. You can take it to wool markets, holiday.
Yeah.
You can put some tips, 15 centimeter DPN, circular needles.
That's
and
perfect,
in the bag, you can measurements, stitch maker, everything.
Yeah. So that's your all-in-one in a way, but for traveling.
A small all-in-one.
Yeah.
And then I have a big one for all-in-one. You can put everything inside. Tips, 15 centimeter DPNs, 20 centimeter DPNs, in between always circular needles.
Yeah.
The flap is here, you can put it around. Nothing is falling down. And you have a quick access to all your needles.
What a dream. I need one of these. Why don't you tell us about the manufacturing process itself? So what are your company values and what materials do you use?
If I knit by myself, I need high quality. I need good yarn. If I make knitting needles, I need also good quality. And I'm searching for the best material and I find Rundfeld.
Yeah.
And it's not so easy to find a very good Rundfeld. I got it from a German supplier, which also gives a felt to museum, opera, designers, yes.
Okay.
And it's very difficult because we have two different thickness. I think the thickness.
Thickness,
Yeah,
yeah.
thickness.
Yeah.
It's 2 millimeter and 1 millimeter. So 1 millimeter felt in wool felt is very difficult to find.
Okay.
You also only find always plastic. Yes.
Oh, this, okay, yeah.
Yes, this
that's
is plastic.
Yeah.
You can buy it. But I have wool felt. Yes, I have wool felt, and we cut all by ourselves per hand. We make the buttons, the snap button with machine, Yes, and we sew with two different machines.
Yeah, so everything's handmade.
Yes,
In Bavaria.
Everything in Bavaria.
Well, I have to say you've sold me on your all-in-one needle bag. I think I'm going to have to get one. Let's say goodbye to the audience.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Astrid. She is a really funny lady. Did you see her t-shirt? It said, "I sew needle cases better than I speak English." She was a bit nervous about speaking English, but I'm super glad that we could convince her to do it, because it's great to be able to show you different producers and designers that are not only in the English-speaking world. And we were thoroughly impressed with her bags. They are beautifully made and very colourful and gorgeous. And we thought that they would make an excellent item to include in our gift bag for our retreat participants. So we placed a special order with Astrid, and she has made us custom-made fruity knitting needle cases just for our participants. And we're totally thrilled with it. It's even got our logo on the front, which says Fruity Knitting, of course, and the colours of our logo ended up dictating our colour choices for the needle cases. So in our logo, we have a red apple with a green leaf, and so Fruity Knitting is in red and green, and to keep it elegant, we thought we'll keep the colours in green and red as well. So we needed a light colour for the embroidery to stand out, so we chose this light green, and then we wanted Farbenfroh in the inside, so that is the joyful colour. So we've got all these luscious shades of red on the inside, and we chose her multifunctional bag because we thought that would be appeal to the most amount of people. So I've got another one here, which is filled with knitting needles. So this bag, it's got more knitting needles than I will ever use, because I only ever use chiagu, and I don't use that many. But you can actually store multiple, Astrid says up to 40 40 circular needles in this bag. There's lots of spaces for DPNs. You can see I've got my DPNs here. I've even got an unpicker there. I've got crochet hooks all in there. At the back, I've got the other needle tips for my chiagus. I've even got my knitting glasses stuck there. And at the front, I've got a tape measure and a needle measure. So you can fit endless things in here. And what is super, there's also a little pouch with a zipper for your stitch markers or whatever other, or some money. So if you go to a cafe, you can buy yourself a good coffee. And on the zipper is a little poodle, just like our Jack, which is a super sweet touch. We're thrilled with these.
Yeah, Astrid did that without our knowledge, so we had a very happy surprise when we saw Jack on the bags.
And we've got very happy news for all the Fruity Knitting patrons who would like to buy one of Astrid's needle cases. Astrid is offering a 10% discount to all Fruity Knitting patrons. So enjoy looking through her online shop. She has so many gorgeous colours. And thanks very much to Astrid.
We would like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to all of our wonderful viewers out there who support this show financially as Fruity Knitting patrons. Our patrons are the backbone of Fruity Knitting. These days, society is so used to getting free content everywhere that understandably it is easy to forget that someone out there put in a lot of time and effort to create that content for you. Now, we don't make any money off YouTube advertisements or sponsorships, so our patrons are the only reason that we can afford to produce this show. If you're new to our channel, or if you've been watching us for a while and thinking about becoming a patron, then now is your chance to take that step. And think of it as taking one of us out for a monthly coffee date. It's just $5 a month. It's a small gesture, but it makes a very big difference to us. And it couldn't be easier. Just go to the description box below to click patreon.com/fruityknitting to support this channel as a Hebridean, a Merino, or a Shetland patron. Thank you so much for watching our videos, and thank you for supporting the show.
Yes, thank you very much. And while we're on the topic of thanking patrons, we're very excited to share a special offer from Rowan, because Rowan is giving our patrons an exclusive 25% discount when you purchase both the yarn and pattern from Georgia Farrell's Abstract Volume 2 collection, and that's our feature interview in this program. So you can choose to buy the full book with the yarn or a single digital pattern paired with the yarn, and the 25% discount is off both the pattern and the yarn to knit it, which is a really fantastic deal. And the featured yarns in the collection are Kid Silk Haze and Summer Light 4-ply, which is a very beautiful 100% cotton. And the full details of the discount, as usual, can be found in our program notes on our website, fruityknitting.com.
So as Mum mentioned earlier in the intro, we've just come back from our 2-week road trip to the UK, where we recorded some new interviews for the show. And first of all, we spent about a week on the outskirts of London in an Airbnb, where we interviewed 3 different designers. And then we headed eastwards to Devon to visit the John Arbon Textiles woolen mill. Now, John Arbon Textiles is a small-scale worsted spinning mill that specialises in stunning heathered yarns. Mum interviewed the founders, John and Juliet Arbon, back in episode 79, and that was an online interview. And now, 6 years later, we finally had the opportunity to visit the mill in person, which was really nice. John and Juliet Arbon have since retired and left their legacy to their 2 former employees, Sonia and Helena. So we got to interview them and ask them about their own backgrounds in the yarn industry, as well as the changes they've made to the spinning mill since taking over John Arbon Textiles.
And just very quickly, for our second retreat in the Austrian Alps, we've got Charlotte Stone, who's heading all of the workshops, and the designer that we always have for the retreats also does an exclusive retreat design, and she is using John Arbon yarns for her exclusive retreat design. And here are the yarns that she's going to use, a stunning colour palette. And the participants will receive this yarn and the pattern as part of their gift bag, so that's something to really look forward to. But the colours are utterly gorgeous.
Yep, you just want to gobble them up. And we got lucky because on the weekend before our interview, John Arbon Textiles hosted their annual open mill weekend, which was like a mini fibre festival. Visitors could sign up for a tour of the mill, and they also hosted a small marketplace with vendors, workshops and talks in the local town hall. And the town hall is this beautiful Georgian building with old wooden beams and elegant plasterwork. So the atmosphere was very beautiful, relaxed and cosy. Of course, we took the opportunity to interview some vendors while we were there, so you'll get to see those interviews in future episodes. So during this time, we stayed just outside of Malton, next to an old farm surrounded by luscious rolling green hills, dotted with sheep and divided by hedgerows. And I learnt a fun fact about hedgerows because Devon has more hedges than anywhere else in the UK. They definitely add to the beauty of the landscape, but they also serve a very practical purpose. They create natural fences for livestock, provide shelter for wildlife, and they can even help to prevent flooding. But what felt especially surreal were the towering hedges lining the narrow country roads. Driving through them felt a bit like navigating a green labyrinth because you didn't really know where you were going. And the nearby villages were full of charming storybook houses that looked like they came straight out of a Beatrix Potter book. While we were in the area, we visited the stunning moors of Dartmoor National Park, known for its many archaeological sites and half-wild ponies that have roamed the land for thousands of years. Luckily for us, they're not shy around people, and we even managed to get some very cute footage of mothers with their foals. We also stopped by a beautiful old mansion called Bovey Castle, and we did film a little travel vlog about the area, which you'll get to see in another episode, so I'm not going to spoil you with any more details.
So that's a little glimpse of what we got up to in the UK. Whenever we travel, we're always trying to keep our eyes open and see if there's anything interesting that we can film and include in the episodes to show you. So now it's time for our great interview with Georgia Farrell, which we're very excited about. Hope you enjoy it. So that also means it's time for us to say goodbye, and we'll see you very soon in July.
Yeah, thank you for spending time with us.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm really delighted to be joined once again by the British knitwear designer Georgia Farrell, who we previously interviewed in episode 123. So Georgia's designs are both sleek and intricate. So they combine clean, simple cuts with bold colour contrasts and striking geometric details. And her work is often inspired by the lines, shapes and patterns found in modernist architecture. And her latest collection, Abstract Volume 2, is a really good example of this. So it's really great to have you back on Fruity Knitting.
It's really good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, so just for the viewers who haven't seen our previous interview and are new to your work, can you give a brief description of your background and design aesthetic?
Sure. So I'm a trained textile designer. I studied for my BA in textile design, specialising in knit. And I've been working in the industry for about 11 years now. And I've worked with Rowan yarns for basically the whole length of my career. They were one of the first brands that I worked with, and I work with them much more closely now, which is lovely. And in terms of my kind of design aesthetic, I really love architecture, and I love looking to architecture to inspire my work. One of my favourite things to do is to just wander around a city on foot with my camera, taking in the architecture, stopping to knit and sketch and have a coffee. And that's basically how I kind of look for inspiration. I also like to kind of collect colours when I'm on my travels or out and about. That's something that I really enjoy, and it influences my work a lot too.
That's so interesting, because after our first interview, I had never seen architecture in that way. And then every time I go to a new city, I often think of you. I think, oh, Georgia, she'd like that building.
That's so nice. That's the best compliment I could have. So that's, I've given you that kind of eye to look for right now. That's so lovely. Great.
That's good. Great. Okay, so we have Georgia's second abstract collection and all the bits and bobs all around us. And her approach to developing a collection is impressively thorough, even before the actual designing begins. And I think this level of preparation just brings a strong sense of cohesion to all of the garments that are otherwise quite distinct. So I thought it would be great if you could go through your process again from the first concept to the final collection.
Sure, I'd love to. So the first step for me in designing abstract was coming up with a colour palette. And I had a real strong sense that I wanted it to have the same freshness that the first collection had, but this is more for summer. So I wanted it to have some more warmer colours that felt kind of zesty and zingy, like this orange. The coral really plays a big part in it. And so I looked at the two yarns I really wanted to work with, which was Rowan's Kid Silk Haze and Summerlight 4-ply. I picked out all the colours.
So Summerlight is cotton?
Yes, 100% cotton and 4-ply weight. Yeah. Yes, and I picked out all the colours that I liked, vaguely, before then starting to work the collection and taking out the colours that just weren't necessary or weren't working in the combination. And it's quite a big colour palette, actually.
It is. Let's show the audience.
Yeah, quite a lot of colours.
But they're beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So then the next step was what I call the kind of creative experiment stage. So I like to do, especially with the abstract series, a lot of collage. So that was my first step, was to source paper, and when I couldn't source paper, to paint papers that matched my colour palette to experiment with. And these are just some of my leftovers, but they just really show, I think, the kind of the shapes and proportions and bits and pieces that come together to make the designs.
I mean, it's such an interesting colour palette. Did you start, for instance, with like you thought, okay, I want coral, but then I want something cool, or I want something neutral, and then you fill in the gaps? Or
yeah, it's quite instinctive for me. The coral probably was the main kind of build of it. I had just had a thing about that colour at that time. It's funny. And then the coral, it works quite nicely with like the tealy green shades, because they're opposites on the colour wheel. They kind of got that complementary colour thing going on. They're kind of quite harmonious. And I guess I'm looking for different qualities in a colour palette and what a colour can bring. So I want a bit of freshness. I go for the mint green, maybe. I wanted something to ground the colour palette. So these kind of khaki greens and these nice like
neutral,
muted grey, neutral. Yeah. I like a colour palette to have a bit of everything. So the pops, the neutrals, the freshness. Yeah, exactly. I think to get that sense of balance, it's important.
Okay.
So then I spend a long time collaging, experimenting. These are just some of my, hold one up, one of my collages that went on to inspire a design in the collection.
And you can see here that they kind of look like silhouettes of modern architecture.
Yeah. So basically, I'm looking for that aesthetic or that feel, that language of architecture without necessarily screaming a building.
Yeah.
So just picking out the shapes, isolating them, playing with scale, proportion, combination, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that one does it very well in a simple way.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't, and that was the fun thing. It's like I can go all out or I can really pare it back. And then swatching is the next stage for me. So I like to try and interpret what I have created with paper or embroidery or folding paper or collage, whatever it is, into a knitted fabric. That's my textile design kind of background. I really spend a lot of time developing the fabric before I think about the outcome. So sometimes it's a very literal translation. So I'm literally, the colour blocks are in exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then other times I have to think a bit more about how I'm going to put things together or how they're going to work.
And I like what you've done here, because that's like a smoother, that's not such a sharp line there.
Yeah.
And you've joined a thread of this with a thread of that. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically this design uses the two yarns held together in combination. And I was playing with colour and thinking about what combinations I could make. And I like the idea of keeping one colour of the cotton with two different colours of the kid silk haze, how you can make it lean in a different direction. So the coral, can I make the coral appear a bit more orange and then make the coral appear a bit more pink? And how do you get that kind of light and shade and the shadow, almost a shadowed effect? So that's kind of part of the interplay of the colour blocks in this design.
And also you've started to incorporate different stitch patterns, which is another texture. Yeah. And this is a moss stitch, what we would call moss, or Americans call seed stitch, I think. But it actually kind of looks like garter stitch on the side.
Yes, like a diagonal.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add an extra dimension and get that sense of light and shade. And you can do that through colour, but you can also do that by bringing in some really simple textures and by putting them within the box of the intarsia. You're not really adding that much complication. So I think that just makes for a more dynamic and fun knit.
And these little ones were just your original ones?
Yes. So I start off by making mini swatches I think of it as like testing a theory out. So I think this is going to work. And then I have a bunch of them that didn't, as well as the ones that went on to be successful designs. But for me, that's all part of the process. Yeah. The final swatch, there's not just one swatch generally for each design. There's a whole series, really.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So what do you want to see next?
We'll just have a look at this as another example of I did some very basic kind of cross-stitch style embroidery on some plastic canvas as a kind of fun throwback technique as an experiment. And then how I worked that into a design that ended up using duplicate stitch. So this was my initial test. How could I bring that feeling into a knitted fabric? So it's a plain knit, but then you embroider using duplicate stitch or Swiss darning, these scribble-like shapes, and it's about the composition and it's quite a playful design.
Yeah.
And so that I wanted the colours to reflect that in that kind of, the pops of pink and the green being really like fresh and kind of giving a little balance to the design with the dark colours. So that's just another example of the evolution of a fabric, I guess.
And it's interesting, what I see now is you do actually need so many colours because there's cohesion here, but that's a real different look and feel than
Absolutely.
this, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's references.
They're all the same colours, just used in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So then for me, the next step is to sketch. I spend quite a long time drawing out my designs. Sometimes I have a fabric and I don't know what it's going to be until I sit down and try and draw a design from it. Other times I'm informed by maybe the way the swatch is developing, that it wants to be a certain shape or construction. And so I also try and look at this point for balance within the collection. So have I got different lengths? Have I got different silhouettes? Have I got
different types of garments for different body types?
Yeah. I really want there to be something for everyone. So different garment types, different techniques. I haven't gone wild. Have I gone wild on the intarsia? Do I need to bring in some simpler knits? I like a lot of textured knitting as well as the intarsia. So I wanted to make sure I was hitting all of those different kind of points throughout the collection, so that there was also a balance of colour as well. So it's really a big part of the process for me. And then for this collection, we decided to add a second colourway for the whole collection, all of the designs, almost retrospectively at the end.
Okay.
And that was quite a different process for me because I'm not swatching at this point. I don't have time. I was about to go on maternity leave, which really added to the rush. And so I knew I wanted to do something different with this colour palette. I think of a colour palette as like a blueprint for a knitter to then put their own colours on it, as well as being its own colour palette. So for this colour palette, I decided to go for a more tonal look. So we've got lots of shades of blue and into grey. And then, thank you. And then we've got the pops of yellow and the aqua blue that acts almost as an accent as well. And so I had to rely on recolouring my sketches, which I do digitally anyway, so that was really helpful. And then I just had time to make a series of mini swatches to test out blends of the two yarns.
Okay.
For example, in this design here. Yeah. And so it was really interesting to work in that way. It was almost having to reverse engineer my original process.
That is. And it's so interesting what I can see here where you've got the two yarns. What it does is it makes the bold outlines a little softer.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it blurs or allows things to blend a bit more.
To the eye.
Yeah, exactly. And for this colourway, I actually decided to add a bit more contrast in with the colours and have a bit more of that mild effect to show another way that you could, execute the design yourself.
Okay,
so
cool.
we're just going to have a quick look at a couple of the designs. This is diagonal. So I started off with these kind of paper experiments. I was folding to get this kind of corrugated effect and perforating. And I had these two experiments and I was thinking, well, where's this going? So first step was to see how I could knit these ideas up. And then I had these two mini swatches.
Okay.
Yeah, so using lace holes to try and get that kind of perforated effect and some travelling cabled stitches to get these kind of crisp lines, and then using knit and purl to get this kind of corrugated look, that idea of light and shade and depth and texture. Yeah. And then I still was a bit baffled at this point because I didn't know how to bring it all together. And eventually this was the final design swatch that I can show you how I brought it all together. So I ended up putting bands of each of them respectively. And so you can see some of like the lace holes here with the travelling cables, and then the bands of the texture. And we've got the diagonal lines working back and forth in stages. And it just kind of, I guess, shows you the evolution of the design. Then was the sketch. And so I knew with this design, I really didn't want a shape that was going to interrupt. There was a lot going on, and I liked the way it looked in a rectangle. I remember thinking that. And so I decided on this kind of jacket style cardigan that's got no gap for the neck, because then the pattern could run uninterrupted in a straight, in a straight line. And I didn't want any added trims to add fuss or anything. I just, I really liked it in its kind of raw form. And then I was able to do that by giving it this kind of shape.
Let's take this right away.
Oh, lovely. And it's got a nice fold back kind of placket.
Yeah.
Which allows the pattern to run right up to the edge, but then to still have a nice neat
and
finish.
It's got an interesting back of the neck.
Yeah, so there's no gap for your neck. The fronts meet in the middle, and that means that the kind of shoulder seam actually sits further back down your back and creates this really elegant silhouette.
And then this is sort of just slightly raised at the front.
Only slightly, because I actually adjusted it so that the front and the back are shaped differently to mean that the front doesn't come up too far.
How did you do that?
They're just different shapes. The front's slightly longer than the back, and the angle.
Okay.
So yeah, there is. It took a bit of fiddling around, but to get the silhouette just right, and then it makes for I think it makes for quite an elegant.
Totally.
I think it could look really nice worn casually, but also worn a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that it's one of these. It's got all these subtle details in it, like what you said here.
Yeah.
Here you've got it with the eyelets. A little bit more there. Every panel is different.
Exactly. The point at which you've got this kind of change in direction is different each time it moves around, and that just gives for a more sort of like dynamic feeling. I think makes it look a bit more. Yeah, adds more interest.
It's really a design that someone looks at you and then keeps looking and keeps looking, think, oh, look at that.
That's great, yeah, totally. And this is called Woven. So I started off with this tiny little woven paper experiment, and I liked the idea. Well, I liked that I'd seen this effect in architecture, but obviously weaving is a fabric thing. So I like that we're coming kind of full circle with it. So I made some little swatches which have like this woven effect, and I really like the idea of playing with scale within my design. So I made a small scale and a large scale of the pattern, and they marry up beautifully. Like the small is 50% of the large, so that things can line up. And so when I was developing this design, I was like watching how I could put them together, and that then informed the garment shape. And the construction.
Well, you've got so much information. Let's just have a look here. That is really clever. I really like how you've done that.
Yes, so it matches up.
It is satisfying to the eye.
Yes, I think so too.
And also the colour is really good.
Yeah, so I love doing these kind of monochromatic colour palettes, using 2 shades of the same colour. I think if you're afraid of colour, it's a really good, easy way, because it nearly always works, And so this was the sketch that I developed. I thought a sleeveless pullover would be really great shape to show off these stitch patterns. And I do love a bit of asymmetry, so I decided to have the change run just one side of the neck. And so in order to simplify this, instead of having extra seams, I moved the seams that would normally be at the side to the front and the back. So you knit the large scale front and the large scale back in one piece, and the small scale front and the small scale back in one piece. So that might make more sense if we have a little look.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the construction has a seam here that runs up the front, just offset from the neck, and is symmetrical. So the same at the back. So the pieces are actually knitted. The front and the back in one, and then the front and the back in one piece.
Okay, let me just ask some extra questions here. If we put it on the side, so we're knitting here, up, then we're casting off here, and we do this section and then this section.
Exactly.
Sew up this and then pick up stitches for the armhole.
Absolutely.
And then you do the same to the other side.
Yeah.
Excuse us. And then you pick up stitches into the
add the neck
it reminded me immediately of a cricket vest, which I really love.
Yeah, totally. I can see that.
It's a really cool kind of nod to. It's very English.
Yeah,
in a way.
do you think?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I can totally see the cricket vest reference, but I like that. I think that's like a reappropriating it for a different.
Yeah. I mean, she's got so many gorgeous designs, but I find like even your asymmetrical designs, this being one of them, really does look very balanced and harmonious. So I want you to talk more about how you achieve that, especially because you're juggling so many different elements. You've got the shape of the garment, which you say you do at the end, but you've got quite strong colours, which you've got more so here that you're working with, and then you've got all of the little individual motifs that you've got to determine what size they're going to be and how to place them, especially when you've got to grade a garment. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So I thought I would pick a couple of the designs from the collection to illustrate how I've kind of created balance within the designs. So the first one I'd like to look at is shapes. So the inspiration was this collage here with these kind of stepped shapes, lots of L-shaped right angles, rectangles and squares. And the composition is asymmetrical and it's quite random, but it's maybe not as random as it might appear. To create balance, I thought about creating balance through the diagonal. So rather than symmetrically left and right or top and bottom, the balance is through the diagonal. And how did I achieve that? Well, one of the things I've done is I've mirrored some of the shapes. So you can see here this stepped shape is been flipped both horizontally and vertically. Same with this L-shaped shape here. And then the other thing to think about is obviously the colours in the composition. So where I've got dark colours and where I've got light colours, I wanted to feel a bit balanced. So these two very similar shapes here, using two of the dark colours. And that just really helps to kind of make it not feel too heavy on one side and too light on the other side.
Can I just say what I see here is all of these shapes individually are quite square and rigid, but you've made them moving or flowing by putting them on the diagonal like that.
And that's the composition then.
That's the fun element,
it's quite a
isn't
contrast,
it?
you're right. And so as an experiment, over here, I've got the same shapes in the same kind of proportions of different colours. And I've just made a random composition to show you how it could quite easily not feel balanced.
Could look ugly.
So, I haven't got the shapes mirrored here, and I've got colours kind of grouped in some places and sporadic in others. And then I've got this real kind of horizontal band, but then it sticks up randomly at the top here. So, and I could kind of move these around in, different combinations and still not feel balanced. But eventually you could kind of go through this process to find balance by looking at, do the colours kind of cancel each other out in their kind of weight? And do the shapes, do I have enough horizontal and enough vertical apart from each other? I've only got the one vertical there, but what happens if I, tried to create more of a sense of balance with this? I mean, I'm doing this really off the cuff, so it might not work out, but you could see how by turning some of the shapes around and just adjusting the composition slightly, you could maybe create something that had a bit more of that feel quite easily.
It's amazing what the eye naturally likes, and it's fairly universal too, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
It's amazing how the human brain works.
And actually, sometimes it's not until you see it that it clicks and you go, okay, now it's balanced.
And then you can reverse analyse it.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
to why it is balanced.
Why does it work? Yeah.
Okay.
This is my original design swatch and sketch. And you can see the kind of sheer nature of the Kid Silk Haze was something I wanted to play with in contrast with the opacity of the the solid cotton. So playing on that idea, I thought a nice little t-shirt would be a really elegant kind of piece to show this off. And I wanted a really simple canvas for the pattern to shine. So it's a little t-shirt shaped with a slash neck, grown on sleeves with just a simple rib trim. And then to further enhance that kind of flow on the diagonal, I've repeated that same composition twice and making it flow across the body.
That's really lovely. So is this, and it's so neat, just have to show people on the inside.
It's
incredibly neat.
Yeah, and you do have to be a little bit more particular with it because you've not, you could see ends through. Yeah, and so you do have to be a little bit neater with
where
it.
you're weaving in your ends has to definitely be under the...
Absolutely, the right colour especially,
So is this knitted bottom up?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And then in two pieces, and seamed at the sides.
Okay, but it's a fairly simple design really, isn't
Absolutely,
it, to knit?
yeah. It's all about the composition and of the shapes and the colours and where they sit and that flow, isn't it?
And this is another version?
So I wanted to show with the two colourways something different, how you could go for a really bold pop of colour for the main colour, something really zingy like this orange. And then by using kind of pastel shades and some kind of darker shades, that really creates a nice effect. It lets the colours pop out. But going for a dark background colour works equally as well. So it's not like a rule you have to follow. You can bring your pops of colour in some of the colour blocks, and that equally works beautifully. So I just wanted to give a different idea for people when they're picking their own colours.
So people who actually generally would like or feel more comfortable in neutrals, they can easily wear that. It's only just a little pop.
Yeah.
This one's for me. This is bright orange. Totally my design.
Perfect.
Okay.
And the second design I'd like to show you is called Voids. So this was the original collage that I created, and I kind of cut the windows out of the background colour and placed different colours behind it. And I played with the opacity of the two yarns, the contrast there, but in the opposite way to the previous design by adding like almost these sheer windows, voids. And so I had this really square collage, and I had to try and figure out how I could then put those shapes onto a garment. And unlike this design I'm wearing, where I repeated the pattern all over, I love the simplicity of this, so I knew I wanted to scale it up and just have these 3 blocks. But I was looking for a silhouette that I could put them onto. And this was a little experiment to show you. This is the sketch for the original design, or the final design. What happens if I put it on a cropped version, and what happens if I made it into a sweater dress?
That's definitely a no.
No, and you can see, so it looks like it's been stretched badly, and the proportions of the colours completely change. This block here, which is the smallest one, is by far the smallest one now, and these long thin shapes just make you look like you're a million miles long.
And that's quite heavy,
very heavy, but then in the cropped version, the block that is the largest one that kind of maybe dominates as like a secondary colour after the background is now very small, probably in proportion they're actually very similar, and so how does that change things? Well, if I was going to do it now, I might want to bring that up and make a bigger proportion this colour, because I wanted to have a secondary colour, so it was just an experiment really to show what happens if you do that.
That's obviously the best.
Exactly.
Obviously,
it has balance. It's quite harmonious, isn't it? The blocks don't feel like they're maybe fighting each other.
Exactly.
And
like
so
that looks like a weird afterthought. Like he's not quite right.
But there, it's got enough volume to feel like it. A presence, and it's meant to be there. So this is the final garment. It's got a slightly A-line shape so that it's quite flattering. And the blocks, you know, they are semi-sheer, but they're not too placed into horrendous
it's not
places.
exactly, it's not right across the bust line.
Exactly, so that was a consideration too. And then we've got just simple raglan shaping, so it's kind of like a t-shirt design.
It's a very neat little neck.
Yeah, so it's got fold back cuffs, neckline, and a hem as well, and it's in the same way. And this was also something to consider, you know, what am I going to do at the bottom there? So I start the block after the hem so that you've got the continuation.
Yeah, it is nice having a hem like that. You don't want ribbing under here.
No.
And it looks so neat.
Yeah, yeah,
It's lovely.
doesn't it?
And here's a second colourway.
Yes.
Similarly. You know, it's interesting. This one, to me, I find even more striking. Like, I love coral. I can wear coral a lot, but this one I find even more striking because just this neutral background, and then you've got these...
Yeah, it really allows the colours to sing. So similarly to before, I wanted to create a second colourway that offered something different. You know, the coral is quite a bright colour and the blocks are more muted. In this case, I went for a neutral background and brought in the two pop colours from that palette, and then also a slightly deeper version in this tealy blue.
I love this version.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And it works really well. So it just shows you, you know, you can change the colours in a design. I often talk about using it as a blueprint. You don't have to put a bright where a bright is and a neutral where a neutral is. You can flip it on its head and do the opposite. But it's just about making sure that you've still got the balance at the end of it.
Wow, okay. And Georgia also teaches workshops, and we're totally thrilled that she's going to be teaching at one of our knitting retreats in the Austrian Alps this coming October. And for one of the workshops there, she's going to be teaching the importance of proportion and balance within a colour palette and how to pick out effective colour combinations. And I'm so excited for this workshop because I think it's going to be so helpful to so many knitters, because even some really competent knitters can still feel insecure about putting colours together. So now I want you to share your insights with us.
Sure. So using collage, one of my designs, in fact the one I'm wearing, as an example, we can look at how proportion and position and placement within the design really affects this idea of balance in terms of the colours this time. So I've got here my original collage in repeat, how it appears on the garment, and I haven't changed any of the colours. I've just changed the proportion and placement of them within the composition.
And all the shapes are exactly the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the only thing that has changed is I've moved the colours around basically. And I just wanted to show you how that affects not just the balance, but like the feeling of the composition and combination. So this is the original, and you can see it feels quite light and fresh, really bright and light. In terms of looking at what sits forward and what stands out, this horizontal deep purple block really pops out in this composition. But equally, I think the light green actually has quite a lot of dominance there.
It's got airiness.
It does.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to this composition, it feels really dark and heavy. And this horizontal block still really pops out because it's in that light green and there's a lot of contrast around it. But overall, it feels really heavy and dark because of the dominance of this dark purple, where there's so much of it. And the coral is quite an intense colour itself. So in that combination, I think it's feeling a bit heavy to me.
I agree. And the eye just goes to these big dark.
Yes.
And the shape of that comes out here.
Yeah.
It's like a negative space. You don't see it. It's like the air behind the other spaces.
Exactly. Yeah. But in this composition, it's completely different. And then down here, these two are quite similar. You've got this tealy green really dominating quite a lot, actually. But you can see how this horizontal bar that was once really prominent in different ways now just almost completely disappears because it's in that coral and it kind of blends away. I think, the green and the purple are really dominating this one. And this composition I actually feel isn't is quite well balanced, but it has a completely different feel now. It feels heavier and darker and a bit more intense. It doesn't have that light, airy feeling that you've got over here. So it's just really a little interesting experiment, I guess, for me to do, to see why it reinforces why that works so well. And so
okay, before we move on, I just we've got to see the original.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So here it is here.
Yeah, this is probably my favourite piece from the collection.
It's very, very striking.
And it's full on intarsia, and it uses the two yarns held together throughout. So not only have you got this play on the colour blocks and the texture and the composition, but then you've got the blend of the yarns and in places we've got a really good colour match, really close, but then in other places I've played on like a colours leaning. So for example here there was a better colour match in the range, but I wanted to make it echo that pinkiness.
Yes.
So I used I think it was called Plum, and it really kind of lifts that block now. So there's a lot going on in this design, and it took a lot of working to get it.
But it's really gorgeous, and
glad
then you've done it into
so in the
very
other
successful colourways.
And it's quite interesting to see, like for example, I think this block really stands out in this composition because it's in the colour pop, that accent colour, whereas in the original it's sort of in the mix, but it's not shouting. So that's a really interesting. It just shows you how easily you can change things and tweak things.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So just something you can try at home. Try getting 3 colours and making a combination that you like. But to play with proportion and within a combination, take a piece of card, and if you mark out every centimetre for 10 centimetres, each of these blocks now becomes 10% of a whole bar. And you can try playing around with the percentages. So what would it look like if I had an even split, like a 30-30-30? What would it look like if I had 80% one colour and then just 10% of these two? And then even change the colours around within that mix. And a little tip for you, I really like a 60-10-30 as a colour palette, and I think it's a really good entry to doing this, because you've got a clear main colour, a clear secondary colour, and a clear accent colour, and that is just a really easy
starting point.
For you to have a go. And I think these 3 colours could actually work in, I could move them around and it would still work. It would just again change the feeling of it. If we had lots of this earthy khaki, it would have a very different feel. Right now it's quite light and airy and bright.
It's so, I know, if I'm trying to imagine this without doing it, but if this was like your 60%, my tendency would to make that 30 and this 10.
Yes, you would I would do the same. Because,
cool. I got it right.
Because the yellow, it needs to fight back, basically,
it's got to be
that
equal
heaviness.
to that. And then that would be the highlight.
Exactly. This is a really something simple you can try at home, and just be playful with it and see what you find out, explore.
So I think we've got a scrap colour book here.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit before about finding colours in the first place. Well, where did this inspiration come from before you can even think about proportions and combinations?
I know, because that's what I said. How did you come up with these 2 together?
Yeah.
3 together, they're great.
So one of the things I do is I have a colour journal. And it's it's like a scrapbook for me to collect colours. I like to think of myself as a collector of colours, whether that's snapping a picture on my phone or picking up a postcard or bits of ribbon in a haberdashery shop or whatever. If I like the colour of it, I want a bit of it, and it ends up in my colour journal. So it's just a place to keep colour combinations when I find them.
And you've got
I've got some notes here. So what do I feel about this? I feel like it's soft and comforting colour combination, but it's quite refreshing and calm.
That's true.
And that's from the green. But I find these kind of warm neutrals quite comforting and soothing, I guess. Over here, I've got a colour combination that I love, like this acid yellow with a nice lilac, but quite a pinky lilac, quite a zingy lilac. So what do I feel about this combination? It's sharp, it's zingy, it's fresh. It's got high contrast because it's got the complementary colours.
Yeah.
So I think that really works. And basically the reason I do this is when it comes to a point where I'm asked to design something.
With a time frame.
Yeah. I've got somewhere to go in terms of reference for colours. And you kind of have to get your eye in, and this really helps you do that because I'm always looking for things that I can add to this resource. You know, do I want something that's quite high intensity with this glowing saturation, or do I want something that's warm and earthy, you know, but still quite grounded but quite bright at the same time? And this one's interesting. It was just a marketing postcard through the door, but I loved this green. So in the journal it goes, but how would I use that green? You know, what colours could I put it with? So I just add a little yarn wrap here, or a little, you know, a snippet of yarn there. It's got some of my pictures in it, some little experiments, or yeah, you know.
What have you written here? Cool, fresh.
Zesty, zingy, still grounded by the earthy tones and the darkness, well balanced. I feel like it's well balanced.
It is, yeah.
And so you can totally do. This one was actually like tapestry walls that I picked up in a second-hand fabric shop, and you can do things like this too with your scraps or from your stash if you've got things in your stash.
Put this back here
so
we don't get the wrong comments on the wrong.
And this one's quite interesting because I've put fresh florals, which is really not like me, but in colour I think I do like that. It's delicate yet punchy. You know, the pink and the yellow really make this interesting and a bit different. So that's my colour journal, and I would say have a go at keeping a colour journal too.
Okay, and then this is an example of simply getting a colour range together.
Yeah. So recently I was asked if I could make a colour palette that had an autumnal woodland feel. And nothing against autumnal woodlands, but it's really not my kind of thing. You can probably see that it features.
It's more me.
It doesn't feature in my colour journal.
Yeah.
So okay, what can I do with this? Where can I start? Well, I think finding some visual references is always a good place to start. I mean, most of us take pictures on our phones all the time, and I do. Especially for colour references. So I trawled my phone for pictures that I could pick colours out of, and I started to build a palette based on some of these images. So some really nice delicate neutrals from some of these kind of like leafy colours. Obviously there needed to be a certain amount of brown in it. Brown isn't really my colour, but it works for woodland. But I find colours that I really like. I find this colour really interesting. It's matched over here to this leaf. It's kind of like on that reddy orangey brown spectrum, which I thought was really nice. Bringing in this acidic yellowy green that I really love made me feel more comfortable in this space. Some lovely mossy greens. I wanted to bring some moodiness to the palette, so I brought in these blue greys that reference kind of moody skies and maybe like a midnight moonlit stroll through the woods, or, you know, bringing in a different kind of reference there, and then filling out the palette.
Definitely fits in there.
Yeah, exactly. And so then I had this quite well-rounded palette with enough like freshness from the greens and this acidic yellow, warmth in the browns and the red, but then it's got that moody feeling. Yeah, and this is a palette that people can pull from. That's the idea of it. So, you know, I could then pick 3 colours out of here and make a combination in quite a lot of different combinations, but actually as a whole they work really nicely together. It's quite well balanced. So that's kind of a bit of a little insight into how I would approach something like that, especially when it's colours that you're not comfortable working with initially, how you can build visual references and bring things together and make it work.
That's super insightful. That's been really, really interesting. Okay, so we have to wrap up the interview, and I just want to ask you a bit more of a private question, because you've recently become a mother, which a massive change to your lifestyle.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell us how motherhood has influenced your outlook on life, or even your designing.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it's just the best thing ever. My son's just my favourite thing in the whole world, which is so lovely. But it definitely is the biggest life shift I think most of us who go through. And I've actually found, I don't know if it's to do with the hormones or what, but I'm so drawn to colour now, which maybe I wasn't quite so much before. You know, I want all of those bright, I mean, you think you saw lots of bright, zingy, fresh colours. I feel like I really feed off of the energy from those kind of colours. And I feel maybe more creative than ever. And actually that I really missed being creative when I was on maternity leave. It's like my outlet, you know, it's my work, but it's also my creative outlet. And I think we all need that in our lives. And
totally. But how do you find, I mean, like for me to be creative, I need to have enough sleep.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. And I did struggle actually afterwards, and there was a period of time where I didn't want to knit at all. But I found for me colour was a safe place because I could play with colour. Even if I didn't want to pick up my needles, I could just, things like my colour journal or just being around yarn was enough for a while.
Wow, okay, cool. So any baby clothes or designs coming, do you think?
Yes, watch this space.
Cool. Well, that's been so exciting to have you on Fruity Knitting again. You're always such a wealth of information. I learn so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to join you.
Good. Okay, let's say goodbye to the audience. Bye.
Bye.
That was cool. It was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah.